Welcome. In this video I will show you Spring Boot. I'll show you how to use Spring Boot, and we are going to use some of the techniques explained in the last video with regards to dependency injection. And Spring Boot is a framework for exploiting like dependency injection and other things in order to make more advanced programs with loose coupling. You can make REST APIs and other things. It's a very useful tool. But in order to do Spring Boot, you're going to have to start a Spring project. So you can use your IntelliJ in order to start a new project. You go to New Project up here, right? Now I got a problem here because in my generators here, I don't have my Spring initializer. And I could have sworn a couple months ago I had it, and I don't have it anymore. But I think if you have the more expensive IntelliJ version, they'll give it to you. But other than that, in order to initialize a Spring project, you can go to this website here, start.spring.io, your Spring initializer. And here, for the project I have on GitHub, I'm on this version 2.6.1. Language is Java, project Maven. And so here in your name, generally the name is going to be similar to the file that it's stored on your computer. You could call it repository. Similar to your local repository. So let's say name, let's say YouTube demo, I guess, whatever, YouTube demo. Your group name is usually similar to your company name. You work for Google, you work for Bunker Hill Community College, whatever it may be. It's going to make this default package for you automatically. And this should look, you can look at the pom.xml. Pom.xml will reflect all of this. See my name here on this app is Workday. It's similar to the file. And you'll also see that this name that you put here, this name YouTube demo, will be the same name. They'll use this name as a name for your main method. Okay, so you'll see that. You can add dependencies. You can add Lombok, which is, what it does is it cuts down your getters and setters. So you use the annotations so you don't have to type out all these getters. You don't have to generate these getters and setters. You can add that. You can add, these are all very standard ones like Spring Web. I'm looking for Spring JPA. Spring Security is very popular. That's your JWT tokens and hashing, singing keys and all that stuff. Spring JPA, right? That's very common. Spring Web gives you a Tomcat server, so you can look at your local host and use start. I think this one will generate like an HTML or a JSP page for you. So yeah, you can add these dependencies if you want. If you want to do some database persisting and stuff like that. I think the H2 database, I'm pretty sure that's your in-memory. Yeah, your in-memory JDBC database. So cool. All this stuff is possible. You don't have to do that on GitHub. With regards to looking at the code I posted on GitHub. So yeah, this would be like your basic starter boot project. I used Java 11. This all looks good. So what you do is you can click generate, and it's going to give you a little zip folder. So what you do is you show in folder, and you're going to have to extract this. Double click, extract all, and usually I put this stuff in this folder here, documents, learning. Just select that. You're going to extract it to this directory. Extract. That's it. Just simply extract it. I should rename it, to be honest. Fine, I'll rename it. Documents, Where is it? Learning. Where do I have it? Bugging out right now. Alright. Let's rename it. YouTube. What did we call the name of it? YouTube demo? Okay. YouTube demo. Call it YouTube demo. Sure, why not? And then you go back to your IntelliJ, and then all you have to do is just click open. You don't have to do new. You don't have to do new project. No, just simply open. Open, and you just look up that document we just had somewhere. Learning YouTube demo. Okay, there you go. You just select it, click OK, trust, new window, and it's going to generate this whole thing. It's going to open the file. It's a big file. It's going to take a little bit of time. There you go. Check out the pom.xml. There you go. There's your YouTube demo. Group BHCC, Bunker Hill Community College. There's your version. These are your dependencies and plugins. Just shows you a very basic Spring Boot project. And you go to your main Java YouTube demo application. I think they added the word application, right? YouTube demo application. They'll give you a little test folder. You can test your context loads. But yeah, that's how you create. That's how you start up a project, and you can run this. I'll show you what it looks like when it runs. Looks kind of cool when it runs. There you go, Spring, and that's it. It just booted up your context loads. Not really your context loads, but it just booted up. So there you go. So I'm gonna close this. We don't need this right now. We'll look at the project I already made. Very similar setup. If you look at my pom.xml, it's like the same, right? But we have all this extra code. So this app, we have a couple enums, associate and manager, and this application reports their state. It will say like associate or manager. It shows. I'll show the constructor for employee. So the employee has a type and it has a unique ID. A type and ID. Your type is an enum. It's a public enum in your model layer, model package. It's either a manager or an associate. And so, yeah, the Spring Boot project will tell you manager with ID of blah 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 has clocked in, and then it will say manager with ID of so and so has clocked out, clocked in or clocked out. Same thing with associate. So if we run our application, I'll show you what it looks like. There you go. Associate with ID, this is randomly generated, has clocked in. Associate has clocked out. And you might ask, well, how can we run the manager one? And there's a few different ways you can do that. You can do this. You can do an annotation here at qualifier. I notice value. Yeah, value equals, and then just a default way to call this manager provider implementation would be lowercase manager. Manager provider service. Okay, so it will run the manager. roster service. Okay. And I think that's right. Let me comment out this primary, because usually primary overrides. Okay, so I commented out primary. And let's run this again. And see, it ran the manager. So we can use the qualifier to run the manager, and we can use qualifier to run associate. I could let me just quickly switch this over to associate. Okay, and let me show you this. This is all on GitHub. Okay, so this is like a visual of what's going on here. Roster service, roster service. Okay. Staffing service. This is an interface here. So this is like your class A, and it will delegate behavior to an interface, coding to an interface, which is implemented by class B. So it's gonna, like, this class, this roster service will implement one of two of these. And I think when you start up the Spring container, I think it instantiates both of these, but we tell it which one specifically at runtime to do, and then it injects one of two of these classes into the roster service, and then it just runs the method inside the roster service, such as start shift and end shift. Turns out it will run both of these. Yeah, it's going to run both of these. If I look here, start shift, yeah, it's going to run both of these. We're going to get an employee object and run both of those. Yeah, so I got this from Wikipedia. A good brief explanation is, Class A may delegate behavior to interface which is implemented by Class B. The program instantiates A and B and then injects B into A. So yeah, this roster service delegates behavior to this interface. Okay, so this roster service class has a constructor injection. So yeah, so when this interface is used, I guess, it will yeah, and then one or two of these will implement this interface, staffing provider service, and then this is injected. See, this has this method here, get employee. It's injected into this roster service. Staffing provider service dot get employee. Staffing provider service has this one method here, dot get employee. So an object of employee will equal the interface of get employee, and when you get the employee, you're going to be able to get its type, and you'll be able to get its employee number. If you look at the employee layer, an all-args constructor has a type and a number, employee ID number. The type is one of two of these, manager or associate. And that's what's going on here. Yeah, so another way to designate which one to run is we don't have to use at qualifier. We could use, I think this is called field injection. So we could do like associate provider service, implementation. We could do that. That's another way of doing this. Right? So if we want to run the associate provider service, we could call that. No, okay. Making sure no primary annotations are active. So I think if we run this, should run the associate. Should make the associate clock in, clock out. Or has clocked in, has clocked out. There you go, associate. Okay. And another way to go about this is we can undo this. Change it back to staffing provider service. Oops. Staffing provider service. Remember, the default way of calling, let's say we wanted to do associate again. The default way of calling this associate provider service, this class here, is just lowercase. Just lowercase this first word, associate, okay? That's just the default way, and Spring will know what you're talking about. Another way to designate one of two of these beans is we can just do we can make the add primary active. Add primary will activate this. Let me show you what happens if we don't tell Spring which of these to do. If we don't tell it, see, it's going to give us an error. Parameter 0 of constructor in our roster service class required a single bean, but 2 were found. So Spring application found 2 of these beans because we got 2 of these enums here, and so it didn't know which one to pick. So one quick way of telling it which one to pick is do the at primary annotation. And when I already showed you, you could also do this one where you do the lowercase manager or lowercase associate, and you can also do this other one, like I said, the add qualifier one. Add qualifier, okay? There's actually another one too, which is you can use your application.properties. We got this profile active here, dev, and we could go here, and I forget exactly how to do it, but something like you do an at default. At default equals dev, so when dev is active, it's just going to run 1 or 2 of these, but I forget how to do it exactly, but it involves using the word default. So this associate provider service implementation, it implements this method here, right? Get employee, and it returns an object of employee because it has to, right? Because it says public employee get employee, so it has to return an employee type. Let's see what happens if you comment this out. Well, there is an error there. Yeah, it needs a return statement, okay? And it has to return. So since we want to see this, oh, there's a message here. I forgot there's an error here. But since we want to see in the console an employee type and a number, an ID number for that employee, we're going to return all fields of employee. We're going to return that. Yeah. The manager provider service implementation has same setup, get employee, we're going to get this. Go back to our roster service. Get type toString. I wonder what would happen if we didn't have this toString here. I guess it would just look like it would just look really weird. But I think employee.getType toString. What if we didn't have the toString here? I just want to see, like, it might just look really ugly. have one of these primary. Yeah, it's going to run the associate. Okay. Let's see what happens if we didn't have the toString there. Yeah, it just looks the same. Maybe I don't have to have the toString there. I thought I had to have that just to cover my ass. So yeah, this code is on GitHub. It's all dependency injection, you know. It's this interface, this coding to an interface. Both of these, manager and associate, will implement this. And in your, remember our graph here, our roster service, our big thing that deals with the Spring container. Our roster service will it needs an instance of this is like a field. The interface is like this interface is used as like a field, and it has this method here, start shift. So we get an object of employee, we have the employee, we have the machine get the employee, and then we have the get an instance of an employee, and then we just get a type. We get a type which is specifically which is specifically like either a manager or an associate, depending on which layer we called, right? Get type, depending on which one we called specifically, with the at primary annotation. Okay. Get type, toString, and we'll get the number, get employee number, which is randomly generated. So yeah, that's how it works. There was something I wanted to say about annotations. Yeah, if you didn't have annotations, you'd have to use a POM, not a POM.xml. What would it be called? Something. One of these. You'd have to use an XML file and specifically tell it about the bean wiring, about how to use the bean wiring. But we use annotations because it's supposed to be easier than doing an XML file. I feel really bad. I could have sworn I remembered what exactly that XML file is supposed to be called, but no, we're not using an XML file. We're using instead these annotations to wire the beans. And again, your application.properties, you can set anything here. You don't even have to have a profile, but you're going to use profiles when you're developing. You're going to have your developer profile, and then like a production profile and a normal profile, depending on what level you're at. And you can use your profile to like let's say in your production, you're gonna want to only run like associate, right? So then you can use your profile you can use that default annotation. So yeah, check the code out on GitHub. Remember to get comfortable with using the Spring initializer to initialize a Spring Boot project. And happy coding.